Hello, and welcome back to The Thousand Nights and One Night. Today we will continue on with the tale of the porter and the three ladies of Baghdad. Now, when it was the 10th night, quoth her sister Dunyazad, finish for us thy story. And she answered, with joy and great glee. It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the damsels teasing the porter with their words, and he ceased not kissing and biting and hugging until his heart was full satisfied. And they laughed on till they could laugh no more. Then they said, thou must not remain with us this night, save on condition that thou submit to our commands, and that whatsoever thou seest, thou ask no questions, thereat no inquire of its cause. All right, rejoined he, and he said, they said, go, read the writing over the door. So he rose and went to the entrance, and there found written in letters of gold wash, whoso speaketh of what concerneth him not shall hear what pleaseth him not. The porter said, be you witness against me that I will speak on whatsoever concerneth me not. Then the cateress arose and set food before them, and they ate. After which they changed their drinking place for another, and she lighted the lamps and the candles, and burned ambergris and aloes wood, and set on fresh fruit, and the wine service when they fell to carousing and talking of their lovers. And they ceased not to eat and drink and chat, nibbling dry fruits and laughing and playing tricks for the space of a full hour, when lo, a knock was heard at the gate. One of them rose and went to see what it was, and presently returned, saying, truly, our pleasure for this night is to be perfect. How is that? Asked they. And she answered, at the gate be three Persian calendars, with their beards and heads and eyebrows all shaven, and all three blind of the left eye, which is surely a strange chance. They are foreigners from Rumland, when the mark of the travel plain upon them. They just entered Baghdad, this being their first visit to our city, and the cause of their knocking at our door is simply because they cannot find a lodging. Indeed, one of them said to me, happily the owner of this mansion will let us have the key to his stable or some old outhouse wherein we may pass the night. For evening had surprised them, and being strangers in the land, they knew none that would give them shelter. And oh, my sisters, each of them is a figure of fun after his own fashion, and if we let them in, we shall have all manner of sport with them. She gave not over persuading them till they said to her, let them in, and make thou the usual condition with them, that they speak not of what concerneth them not, lest they hear what pleaseth them not. So she rejoiced, and going to the door presently, returned with the three monarchs, whose beards and mustaches were clean shaven. They salaamed, and stood afar off by way of respect. But the three ladies rose up to them and welcomed them, and wished them joy of their safe arrival, and made them sit down. The calendars looked at the room, and saw that it was a pleasant space, clean swept and garnished with flowers, and the lamps were burning, and the smoke of the perfumes was spiring in the air. And beside the desserts and the fruits and the wines, there were three fair ladies who might be maidens. So they exclaimed with one voice, by Allah, 'tis good. Then they turned to the porter and saw that he was a merry-faced white albit, but he was by no means sober, and was sore after his slappings. So they thought that he was one of them, and said, O mendicant, like us, whether Arab or foreigner. When the porter heard these words, he rose up, and fixing his eyes fiercely upon them, said, sit ye here without exceeding in talk. Have you not read what is a writ over the door? Surely it befitteth not fellows who come to us like paupers to wag your tongues at us. We crave thy pardon, rejoined, and our heads are between our hands. The ladies laughed at the squabble, and made peace between the calendars and the porter. Seating the new guests before meat and foy, and ate. They sat together, and the portress served them with drink. And as the cup went around merrily, quoth the porter to the askers, and you, O brothers mine, have you no stories or rare adventures to amuse us withal? Now, the warmth of the wine having mounted to their heads, they called for musical instruments, and the portress brought them a tambourine of Mosul, and a lute of Iraq, and a Persian harp, and each mendicant took one and tuned it. Then, while the tambourine and those with the lute and the harp and struck up a merry tune, while the ladies sang so lustily that there was a great noise. And whilst they were carrying on, behold, someone knocked at the gate, and the portress went to see who was there. Now the cause of the knocking, O king, quoth Shahrazad, was this: the Caliph Harun al-Rashid had gone forth from the palace, as he was wont now and then to do, to solace himself in the city that night, and to see and hear what a new thing was stirring. He was in merchant's gear, and he was attended by Jafar, his wizard, and by Masur, his sworder of vengeance. And as they walked about the city, their way led them towards the house of the three ladies, where they heard the loud noise of musical instruments and singing and merriment. So quoth the Caliph to Jafar, I long to enter this house and hear those songs and see who's singing them. Quoth Jafar, O Prince of the Faithful, these folk are surely drunk with wine, and I fear some mischief betide us if we get amongst them. There is no help but that I go in there, replied the Caliph, and I desire thee to contrive some pretext for our appearing among them. Jafar replied, I hear and obey. And he knocked at the door, whereupon the portress came and opened. Then Jafar came forward, and kissing the ground before her, said, O my lady, we be merchants from Tiberias town. We arrived at Baghdad 10 days ago, and alighting at the merchant's cavern, we sold all our merchandise. Now, a certain trader invited us to an entertainment this night, so we went to his house, and he set food before us, and we ate, and then we sat at wine and wassail with him for an hour, and so when he let us leave to depart, and we went out from our way in the shadow of the night, and being strangers, we could not find our way back to our khan. So happily of your kindness and courtesy, you will suffer us to tarry with you this night, and heaven will reward you. The portress looked upon them, and seeing them dressed like merchants and men of grave looks and solid, she returned to her sisters and repeated them Jafar's story. And they took compassion upon the strangers and said to her, Let them enter. She opened the door to them, when said they to her, Have we thy leave to come in? Come in, quoth she. And the Caliph entered, followed by Jafar and the Masur. And when the girls saw them, they stood up to them to respect and made them sit down and look to their want, saying, Welcome, and welcome and good cheer to the guests, but with one condition. What is that? Asked they. And one of the ladies answered, Speak not of what concerneth you not, lest ye hear what pleaseth you not. Even so, said they sat down to their wine and drank deep. Presently the Caliph looked at the three calendars, and seeing them each blind in the left eye, wondered at the sight. And then he gazed upon the ladies, and he was startled, and he marveled with exceeding marvel at their beauty and grace. When the ladies, in their ministrations to the guests, offered the Caliph a cup of the rarest wine, he refused, saying, I am vowed to pilgrimage. So the portress got up and placed a little table of finest inlay before him, on which she set a set of cup of Chinese porcelain, in which she poured spring water, refreshed with snow, mingling sugar and rose water with it. The Caliph accepted this, thanking her cordially, and saying to himself, Tomorrow I will reward her for her kindness. The ladies continued to act the hostess, and pass about the wine till the wits of the companions were dancing dizzily. Then she, who was the mistress of the house, rose up, and having asked if any wanted more, took the cateress by the hand, saying, Rise, my sister, that we may do that which we have to do. Be it as you say, the other answered. On this, the portress also rose, and telling the calendars to get up from the center of the hall and seat themselves by the door, herself cleared and tidied the central space. The other two called to the porter, How scant is thy courtesy! Now thou art no stranger, nay, thou art one of the household. So he stood up, and he tightened his waistcloth. And what would ye I do? And she answered, "Stand in thy place." Then the procuratrix rose and set in the midst of the saloon a low chair and an opening a closet, cried to the porter, "Come help me." So he followed her out down the hall, and saw two black bitches with chains round their necks, which, as he was bid, he led back into the middle of the hall. Then the lady pulled up her sleeves and took out a whip, and told the porter to lead forward one of the bitches. When he had done so, dragging her by the chain, the animal began to weep, shaking her head at the lady, who, however, came down upon her with blows on the sconce. And the bitch howled, and the lady ceased not beating her till her forearm failed her. Then she threw down the whip, and taking the bitch in her arms, clasped her to her breast, wiped away its tears, kissed its head, which she held between her hands. After a little while, she said to the porter, "Take her away and bring me the second." So the porter brought the other bitch forward, and the girl treated just the same as the first. The caliph felt his heart filled with pity at this sight. His chest shook with grief, and he signed with his eyes to Jafar to question the young woman. But Jafar signed to him that it were better to keep silent. Then quoth the portress to the mistress of the house, "O my lady, arise and go to thy place, that I in turn may do my devoir." She answered, "Even so," and taking her seat upon the couch of juniper wood, pargetted with gold and silver, said to the portress and the cateress, "Now do ye what you have to do." Thereupon the portress sat upon a low seat by the couch side, but the procuratrix entered a closet, brought out of it a bag of satin and green fringes and two tassels of gold, and she stood up before the lady of the house, and shaking the bag, drew out from it a lute, which she tuned by tightening its peg. And when it was in perfect order, she sang these lines of love and all the sadness of love. Love at my door knocked, and I gave him bed. When sleep I saw this, he took offense and fled. "Give me back sleep, where has it gone?" I said. They said, "Our friend that keep the sure straight way, who has done this to send you so astray, to lead you blind into the sand," said they. I said, "Not I," but she must answer make. I could not cry, my blood, which is hers to take, lies heavily, not spilled yet for her sake. I chose a girl to put my thoughts on her. She is my thoughts her imager. Now she is gone, far is my comforter. See for yourself, even Allah like a lover, from molten threads of the syrup of life wove her, then made all gems and fruits with what was over. But they said, "Fool, small joy and for rest, torture and tears and hugging to the breast. Shades on a pool, the first drink is the best. If I am not drunk, I came not so by drinking. It was enough to see the ruby winking. There in the glass, sleep saw it too, I'm thinking. It's not that time has passed, but that so has she. It's not that love won't last, but that nor will she. Not that life's gone, but that she's gone from me. My soul is bound by the sense of her body, jasmine and musk and rose of her body, amber and nard, the sense of her body. Allah, comfort you, my sister, cried the portress, when the song was finished. And tearing all her clothes in an ecstasy of grief, she fell a faint upon the floor. And the Caliph saw scars of the palm rod, eye on her back, and welts of the whip, which astonished and appalled him. But the cateress came and cast water in her sister's face until she recovered consciousness. Then she brought her a new robe and helped her into it. The Caliph whispered to Jafar, "You do not seem moved by this. Do you not see the marks of the scourge on the woman? I can hardly keep silent, and I will know no rest until I find out the truth of all this and the matter of the two bitches." "Lord and master," answered Jafar, "remember the condition. Speak not of that which does not concern you, or you will hear that which does not please you." While they were talking thus, the cateress again took up the lute and, pressing against her rounded breast, sounded the chords and sang, "If one came to us plaining of love, what would we answer? Seeing that we are drowned in love, what would we do? If we charge a speaker to speak for us, what would he know of it? He has brought us within 2 fingers of the pit of death. He has cut our heartstrings that they might hold him no more. Has he kept one withered seed of all our love? Does he think at all that when we are stricken and what with disease, all that he has forgotten, we shall call upon God to remember? If one came to us plaining of love, what would we answer? Seeing that we are also drowned in love, what would we do? If we changed the speaker to speak for us, what would he know of it?" Again the portress wept the sad song and tore her robe and fell back fainting, and again the cateress cast water in her face, raised her up, and put another robe on her, while the older lady oft said to him, "Courage, courage for the final song. It is our duty." So the cateress tuned the lute afresh and sang, "Cease this parting as of years. I have no more tears. Your absence is no longer needed. It has succeeded. Men have the months and years alway, women but a day. How shall I call a murder on you when the body's nearly gone that showed what you have done? How cry a debt when the wet, white cheek hardly remaineth yet? Where written the debt? My sighs flan on your flame. That would be well if the game you hunted were still the same. Muslims make a feud, cover him with the rude hates of a multitude. Yet do not for all that he felt of your cruelty would be felt by me. Rather crush me beneath your feet, and he'll not feel his pulses beat at the end of the other side of the street. Again the portress fell fainting, and again her naked body showed the marks of the whips and the rods. The 3 calendars began whispering together when they saw this. "It had been better for us if we had not come to this house, even though we had to sleep on the naked ground, for what we have just seen is enough to melt the marrow in our spines." The Caliph turned to them and said, "Why is that?" "We are afraid of what has happened," they answered. "Is that so?" said the Caliph. "Then you are not of this house." "We are not," they answered. "We mentioned it belonged to the man beside you." "By Allah, it does not," cried the porter. "This is the very first time that I have entered here." Also, God knows, it would have been better for me to have slept on the rubbish heaps among all the ruins. They concerned with each other and said, "We are 7 men to 3 women. Let us demand an explanation of these things, and if they will not answer willingly, we can use force." They all agreed to this except Jafar, who said, "Do you think that right and equitable? Remember, we are their guests, and they had laid down certain conditions which we swore to keep. The night is nearly over. It would be better for each of us to go forth and seek his destiny upon the road of Allah." Then, winking at the Caliph and drawing him aside, he continued, "We have but 1 more hour to stay here. Tomorrow, I promise that I will bring them up before you, and then we can compel them to tell their story." But the Caliph said, "I have not the patience to wait till tomorrow." The others continued their planning, and some saying this and some saying that, but it all came back to the question, who is to ask them? At last, they decided that the porter should do it. And as the jangle increased, the house mistress could not but notice it, and asked them, "Good folk, what are you talking about?" The porter rose to his feet, and standing up straight before the lady of the house, addressed her courteously. "O my lady, this company earnestly desire that thou acquaint them with the story of the 2 bitches, and what maketh thee punish them so cruelly, and then thou fallest to weeping over there and kissing them. Tell us too, for we wait to hear it, the cause of the marks of the whips and the rods on the body of your sister. These are questions they charge me to put, and peace be with you." Then the lady of the house questioned them. "Is this the porter has said, asked in the name of all?" Thereupon quoth she who was the lady of the house to the guest, "Is this true that he hath said this on your part?" And all replied, "Yes," save Jafar, who kept silent. When she heard this, she cried, "By Allah, you have wronged us, O our guests, with grievous wrongings. For when you came before us, we had made a compact and condition with you that whoso should speaketh of what concerneth him not should hear what pleaseth him not. Sufficeth ye not that we took you into our house and fed you with our best food? But the fault is not so much yours as hers who let you in." Then she tucked up her sleeves and from her wrists and struck the floor thrice with her hand, crying, "Come ye quickly!" And lo, a closet door opened, and out of it came 7 negro slaves with drawn swords in hand, to whom she said, "Pinion me those praetors' elbows, and bind them each to each other." They did her bidding and asked her, "O veiled and virtuous one, is this thy high command that we strike off their heads?" But she answered, "Leave them a while, that I question them of their condition before their necks feel the sword." "By Allah, O my lady," cried the porter, "slay me not for the other's sin. All these men have offended and deserve the penalty of crime, save myself. Now, by Allah, our night has been charming, and had we escaped the mortification of those monocular calendars, whose interest into a populous city would convert it into a howling wilderness." Then he repeated these verses. "The fairest gift of strength is clemency. If the weak offend, say do not, for our love's sake, punish me for the fault of a friend." When the porter ended his verse, the lady laughed, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so we end the 10th night. Till tomorrow.